Somebody was telling me a couple of times ago, I know that's Italian for you people out there, that when you're down, you got to keep swinging. Big Vito always keeps swinging. And even when he gets knocked down a few hundred times, he gets up 200 or 300 million times. So, what is that called? Resilience. Guys, you got to be positive and you got to keep kicking.
In smoky rooms where deals are made, loyalty the ace he's playing. A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve.
Brothers and sisters, welcome back. Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Friend of Ours podcast. This is a limited edition series hosted by your main man, Duke Loves Wrestling. And of course, the greatest Don to ever lace up the boots. We're talking about a guy who not only is a friend of mine, he's a friend of yours, he's a friend of ours. The one, the only, Big Vito LaGrasso. What's going on there, Vito?
You know how it is. Rainy day in Florida, so you got to come up with other stuff to do. But we're here taping this great show. A friend of ours, you know what I mean? Because I got friends, you got friends. But some of them want to be friends of ours.
Damn right. They all want to be friends of ours. This is the place to be. I'll tell you that right now. Listen, I made a pork roast. And I'm going to tell you right now, it was an Italian and herb. All right. So it was already seasoned. But I took it. I took some pineapple juice, cup of pineapple juice. I took some hot honey and I put it in the pineapple juice and mixed that in. A little bit of ginger, a little bit of garlic. And then I poured that over the roast with some sliced pineapple. I threw that sucker in the crock pot on low. Did that for 9 hours. Let me tell you something. Unbelievable. It was so delicious. I felt like I was you chefing it up like that. What do you think about that?
I think it's good that you tried something new. I mean, I know you got a slow cooking oven, but that's fucking ridiculous to keep it in there that long.
Listen, it's a crock pot. You know what those are. What are you talking about?
You fucking guys. Buy something new. I mean, you got more money than Roosevelt. Fucking do something with yourself, Buy a new pair of shoes, too, because the ones I seen you wearing, they stink.
You give me a hard time. Do you not cook pork roast or tenderloin or anything like that?
Bro, when it comes to stuff like that, I don't share all my secrets. You know what I'm saying? You never tell the family secrets out loud, especially on a network like this, where we got a couple of million people listening, even if they don't want to admit it. I know you're listening anyway, But, Duke, sometimes you got to keep, some family recipes a secret.
Unbelievable. I'm telling you. This guy suddenly he wants to keep it a secret. Are you not going to tell us about the limoncello? Huh? Or do you serve it chilled, room temperature? Are you not going to talk about the limoncello?
Dude, let me explain something to you. Every time I cook something, my wife posts it on, our social media. I don't come on a show with a light voice. I made a roast. I made a roast. Oh my God. You know what I mean? You sound like a Finook. Get yourself together. You know what I mean? Pull your panties up. You know what I mean? This is a guy show. Come on.
Unbelievable. I tell you. Folks, you can't win for trying. I'm telling you, this is what's happening here.
Can't win for trying. But I mean, Jesus, if you're going to talk about a friggin' pork roast, do like Big V does. He goes and gets his nails done, sits there with all the ladies. They talk about all the daily stuff they're going through, you know what I mean? And then we start talking about recipes and what you cooked during the week and how it turned out. That's where you share your recipes. You don't come on something as popular like this great show, and go, I made a pot roast. Oh my God. Big V, what do you think? Shut up. Keep it quiet, right? Jesus, dude. You're really disappointing lately. I'll tell you.
You know what? I'm not going to share any of my pot roast with you, just so you know.
No, you probably made enough for you and your lady, and then you really put the leftovers in a little Tupperware thing so you can have some for lunch at your executive office, wherever you work. But I mean, Jesus Christ, dude, you didn't even display pictures. What kind of chef are you?
Listen, I thought this was out of style. It's 2025. The whole taking pictures of the food and all that. Are we still doing that?
I do it, and people appreciate it, but maybe you're not as well known. But Duke, keep at it, kid. You'll be there someday.
Kid, kid. Yeah, okay. And speaking of that, folks, we are going to be talking about. We're going to continue our Sopranos deep dive, and one Phil Leotardo is the subject this week. We had such a great time talking about Johnny Sack. Had some great comments about John. Everyone loved John. Now we're going for a guy that some people, including Vito, is a little sour on. But before we even get into that, the lovely Noelle, okay, she was best buns. All right. I always like to make sure I point that out. Best buns. Noelle was gracious enough to send me an article, and it blew my mind. And I said, something, we got to talk about this on the Friend of Ours podcast here. We got to get some consensus here. It was in the New York Post. All right. This is February 15th. The article came out, folks. You can go look that up there. New York Post. The title of the article is Black Long Island Family Sues Wife and Daughter of Notorious Gambino Mob Boss for $50 million after high school brawl. So I'm going to read this thing here. Let's listen to this. The Black Long Island family allegedly assaulted by the wife and daughter of John Jr. Gotti in a race-fueled rage at a high school basketball game have sued the mother-daughter duo for $50 million. Jean and Crystal Etienne, which, that last name is French, could also be Haitian. I think that's actually a Haitian last name there. So Jean and Crystal Etienne claim Kimberly and Gianna Gotti allegedly called their son a, quote, effing monkey, an effing F word. I'm not going to say what that word is, an effing bitch, and told him to F your mother, according to a Brooklyn federal court lawsuit. The explosive February 2024 incident during the Oyster Bay versus Locust Valley game at Locust Valley High School resulted in assault charges for Kimberly, wife of Junior, and daughter-in-law of the late Gambino crime family boss John Gotti, all with her daughter Gianna. But the case went sideways in October on a technicality, and the charges were dismissed. Kimberly's son, Joe Gotti, was playing for Oyster Bay, and Etienne's son, identified only as SS, was on the Locust Valley team. Both mama bears claimed they were trying to protect their sons from verbal abuse from the stands. The Gottis have vehemently denied using racial slurs and insisted Crystal Etienne was the aggressor who hurled insults at their son. But Crystal Etienne, 48, said Kimberly Gotti, 56, and Gianna, 24, were yelling, "Shut up," and getting in some of the faces of the other children in the stands before Crystal's son entered the game. Anyway, you get the point. So, this is interesting. First of all, Vito, you have a long history with the Gotti family, goes way back. Your family has a long history with the Gotti family that goes even further back.
Yeah.
Are you surprised by any of this?
I'm not surprised, but I just want to first, say that the case was dismissed and it had no merit, according to the attorney.
Oh, no, we can't say it had no merit. There was a technicality. So something wasn't filed properly. So
Right.
it had to be dismissed, and it can be refiled. So that's not the same thing as has no merit.
Of course, there are technicalities to everything, but when there are allegations brought and the case gets dismissed, on cue, then they have to refile and do everything all over again. So this has been going on since October. It is now February. When you have families, now I come from St. Athanasius in Brooklyn, and a
Mm.
history of basketball. And when you get families going at it, and your kids are playing even high school ball, and you talk about during white and black era, where you go to some neighborhoods that like you go to some neighborhoods that love you, and that goes for both black and white athletes. And we all know what we're talking about here, respectfully speaking, because I lived through it. And when you have something like this, usually it doesn't get press because the people are just regular everyday people. But because of the name Gotti, this got merit on the fact of their name alone. Now, neither Duke or I were at this game, and we only read reports of what transpired. My take on it is it probably got hot where people's emotions ran over. And of course, when it becomes combative, that's when certain remarks are made or comments are made or allegations are said to where a fight ensues. Now, because of the Gotti name alone, there is a lawsuit. If they were the regular Joe Schmo on the street, they would not have any charges. It would be just a brawl, and it would be one of those things where, okay, things got out of hand, parents, black, white, hey. But because of the Gotti name, this got a lot of press, made the New York Post. There is a lawsuit. You're talking about, heavy financial um, restitution to be made. And this is over, you know, people getting out of hand at a game. Moms and dads have gone at it at sporting events for years. Kids and relatives have gone at it for years. When you talk about, defending your own, of course you're going to stand up and defend your own. But in this case, it's more popular because of the Gotti name. Now, there were other allegations that the school didn't do anything to intercede, which they said because it was the Gottis involved and they didn't want to have any problems. Am I right in saying that, Duke? Did you read that part?
Abs- Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So now you have another point where you have a very homegrown name as the Gotti family in the community, known for some great things, known for some medium things, and known for some things that maybe we won't discuss on this show. And the school, knowing of the reputation of the Gotti family, was held back from doing anything because of repercussions that could possibly happen. Now, the other family, maybe they have street cred, maybe they have uh, other ways to advocate their feelings about this, and they chose to do it through a lawsuit. Whether I'm not sure, Duke, did they submit a lawsuit to the school as well?
Are you saying are they suing the school? I'm not clear on that.
The
I
other
think the
family,
lawsuit
yeah,
that
the other family, along with them suing the Gotti family, are they suing the school for not taking action or making their child leaving their child in a violent atmosphere of any sorts?
I am not clear on that. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, good. So what we have here, guys, is a good old fashioned. um, throwdown of comments, which we all have been associated with. We have something that has been, um, I guess everybody grows up in this atmosphere. If you're a ball player, if you belong to the high school sports or archdiocese sports, any kind of league play, this happens. And this one particular case got a great deal of publicity only because of the Gotti name.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I agree with that 100%. And I'll tell you, look, as a kid growing up in East Boston, back when it was mostly Italian, I played Little League. So this is way, 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 way back. And I can remember, I mean, the team that we played with, we might as well have been the Bad News Bears. We were just a ragtag bunch of kids. Most of us never played ball before, organized ball. You play in the backyard is a little different. But we were not looked upon as a team that was going to accomplish anything. I think we lost our first two games, but then we went on a winning streak and we made it all the way to the league championship. And then we actually lost that game after being ahead. We ended up losing that game, which would have sent us into competing for the little league, in the World Series there. So it was pretty serious and pretty intense once we started winning. And the parents started taking it seriously and started really, really giving a damn. And I can remember the Italian mothers in particular. And these are not old ladies. These are women who are anywhere from 22 years old going all the way up to 40 years old. But the Italian mothers in all shapes and sizes, I can remember some of them chasing the umpires around the around the field, ready to beat the hell out of them for, for not calling the calls the way that they wanted them to call the calls. And so I say that to say this. It's not unusual for tempers to get high at youth sports. It happens. There's no question about it. Um, Parents going at it with parents. I can't say that I've ever seen much of that in my lifetime. But just like Vito pointed out, when you're interacting with a notorious family that's known for being, a family that, hey, if they wanted to straighten you out, they could straighten you out. That certainly could cause a heightened sense of concern, fear, and there's only one of two ways to go: you either fight or you run away. The Etienne family, it looks like they decided they were going to stand their ground and fight. So they were jawing off back and yelling at each other back and forth and what have you. You take it to court. Obviously, your lawyers didn't have their stuff together, which is why it got thrown out. So you can refile and all that other good stuff. But I don't know. It just seems like one of those things where I hope what's being alleged is not true, but I wouldn't be surprised by it. And quite frankly, it's pretty common. So it's unfortunate that the kids got to be in the middle of all that. Adults need to learn how to behave themselves, but it is what it is. It happens all the time. So, and did you ever witness that when because you were actually a star athlete? I wasn't a star athlete by any stretch of the imagination. I was just one of the guys that was always on the team who could do their one job. Baseball, I could steal bases, so I was always good for that. Football, I could knock somebody out. I could hit, so whether I was fullback, middle linebacker, what have you, that was my job, was just to hit people. And even with blocking, still, you got to hit people. But it wasn't like I was, the big star like a Vito was. Did you ever experience in your lifetime parents almost coming to blows over youth sports?
Yes, happened at St.
Huh.
A's. There was a fight between us and I believe it was St. Thomas Aquinas, and there was a heated rivalry because in the church leagues there are churches that you don't like, and there are people. The rivalries are so thick. They bring their people, and we go, and they bring our. When we have our people, they bring their people. Everybody's sitting there cheering. So it came down to one brawl at St. A's that I remember vividly, where my mom was there and fight breaks out. We're looking, my brothers are there, and somebody came up on my mother. It was a guy. My mother balled up her fist and says, "You go right ahead and you fucking try, but I will call my brother and my father, and you won't fucking be here with in the next 10 minutes." And sure enough, my fucking uncle showed up after that. The guy had left, but as soon as my uncle showed up, people knew that it was fucking real, and shit like that happens. There was another time in Thai Cobb basketball where we're playing, and I'm playing for Thai Cobb basketball, and this team came in and they were trying to push us around on our home court. So this one kid kept, egging this other guy on in my team, and I kept doing it. And I fucking stood up for him, and there it went. I fucking threw down. My mother and father were at the game, and my coach, and everybody. They stood behind me. My father was right there, ready to brawl. My mother too, and I got thrown out of the game. But my coach told me afterwards, he said, "Vito, you did good. You never let somebody come on your home court and disrespect us." And I got a lot of respect for that. My mother and father were happy because they see me playing ball, something I love to do, but they also see me stand up for my teammate and stand up for myself. You know what I mean? And I showed up. So, I mean, when you're playing ball like that, that's what you do. High school, the same thing. You stand your ground. You don't let nobody knock you down. And that's exactly how you're brought up. So, for people who are listening who are involved in sports, this is just a natural thing. This particular case got blown out of proportion. Why? Because of the name Gotti.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. Again, the fear, the concern, you're either going to fight or you're going to run away, and to be continued. Who knows? They're probably going to retry this thing, um, get their paperwork straight, and we'll see what happens. But you brought up a good point. I just want to say this because when you were growing up, when I was growing up, we just lived in a different world than what we have today. There's no two ways about it. It's crazy. I can remember being a kid and the Rocky movies were out, and it was a big deal. And some other kid came over the house and was visiting with their parents, and me and the kid are talking about Rocky, and then the kid decides he's going to punch me right in the stomach, and that was the first time I ever got punched.
Right.
So my father comes out. I didn't realize he was standing and listening, but he comes out on the back deck, and I'm holding my belly and all this other stuff, and he's looking at me. I've got tears in my eyes. He's just looking at me, not doing anything about it. And I realized, well, shit, I better fight. Like, you know what I mean? This is what you have to do. This is life. And I'm not, listen, I'm like 5, 6 years old. And literally, me and this kid were throwing punches at each other. And that was the first fight I ever got into. And it wasn't about who won or who lost. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was a couple of little kids just hitting each other. But it did teach me that, like, hey, no one's going to bail you out. You're either going to stand your ground and do something, or you're just going to be weak for the rest of your life. Which way are you going to go with this? And it's interesting because in life, whether it's physically, whether it's professionally, legally, my penchant for standing firm, standing tall, fighting for what I know is right, that is what I'm known for. And that is one of the things that people come to me for because they know, yeah, Duke's going to fight. He's going to do the right thing, but he's going to fight. And I just find it interesting when I come across people who are the complete opposite because those are the people that get taken advantage of and preyed on consistently. And I hate to sound like the old guy in the room, but I feel like over the past 10, 15 years or so, as a society, we have leaned too far over into this notion that people have to find a way not to fight. And unfortunately, that's why we're in the situation that we're in today. because we we never stood up for ourselves. We never stood tall and really put a real effort into defending ourselves. And now we're just getting steamrolled by people who are tougher and stronger and more skilled. Not to turn this into a political thing, but you see what's happening in Washington. The people who bellyache, they're the losers. And the people who stood firm and was kicking asses, they're the ones in charge now. And whether you like it or not, that's what happened. We got to make sure that these young people that we're raising, they need to understand that even if you lose, even if you get your ass kicked, you better stand up and fight every single time. All right? Earn that ass whooping. Don't just sit there and cower and cry, because the hits aren't going to stop. So you better start throwing a couple back your own damn self. Let me know if you agree or disagree there, Vito.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. You got to stand up for yourself, and you got to take a stand. And there's no two ways about it in life. But a lot of people today are passive, and they don't have those same values like you did before. So it's kind of different era and a different time in the world.
There was a time where you would get into a fight in school, and it's like, listen, you knucklehead, what are you doing fighting in school? You're supposed to be there to learn. But then there was always, did you win?
Well, I hear you.
Like, oh, who won? Right? Who won? That matters. Did you get your shots in? You know what I mean? It's an interesting thing when you see people these days who act as if that's such a horrific concept, and it's like, no, that's why we're in the situation we're in today. That's why you have these kids, unfortunately, who are going around shooting schools up and stuff, because they were never taught how to fight. They were never taught to stand up for themselves from the very beginning. So instead, they just keep getting their ass kicked. They keep getting bullied. They keep getting pushed around, and then they snap, because a human being can only take so much. And that's not to make an excuse for anybody, but I'm telling you right now, folks, I firmly believe in this. Everybody from the beginning needs to learn how to stand up for themselves, stand up for what they think is right, what they've been taught is right. Eventually, when they get old enough, what they know is right. And win, lose, or draw, you can't just stand there and allow yourselves to be a victim of anybody. You got to fight. That's it. You know, that's my public service announcement there. As my gray hairs stand up there, I sound like the old man in the barbershop now. Jesus Christ.
Hey, it's
You
you.
know.
I mean, what are you going to
Anyway,
do? You know what I mean?
it's me. Yeah. Anyway, Phil Leotardo, one of the most controversial characters in the history of The Sopranos, and legitimately a guy that, quite frankly, is probably the biggest villain in the history of The Sopranos. The last two seasons were really structured around Phil being the main antagonist, so to speak. He was a guy who was he was a mf'er, just a guy you didn't want to be on the other side of. Let's put it like that. And we're going to talk about him. So first and foremost, before we even get into the character, the guy who played the character, right, Frank Vincent.
Right.
From your perspective, Vito, what do you think of Frank Vincent's acting, the way that he played that character?
I think he did a fantastic job of being that character, and being that he was in a lot of different mob movies. He had an edge on how to be that character even better than a lot of other people.
Absolutely. I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial. I think, pound for pound, Frank Vincent did the best acting job of anybody in the history of that show. I, there's a lot of people who came and went, a lot of people who did great, but I believed him, Frank Vincent, as Phil Leotardo. I believed that character was a real person more than anybody else. What say you?
I think that he definitely was up there. I mean, if you had to put him in, when you look at the movies he was in, right? I believe he was in Goodfellas, Casino.
Definitely Goodfellas. Yep. Yep.
I think he was in the
Yep.
Raging Bull,
Yep.
The Chicago movie, and I'm pretty sure he was in Gotti. Uh, let me think. Let me think. He was in the movie This Thing of Ours, which was another mob movie, which was very good that I enjoyed watching. Witness to the Mob, and there was another small movie called The Debt Collector. And when he portrayed all these characters, it's not like he had to act. He just had to remember the lines, and then it comes natural, and you just have that swag about you that he carried throughout any and all of his mob movies, which you can give him 100,000% credit because it's not like he had to learn it. He just had to live it. And that's what he did. He lived it.
He sure did. And boy, this guy, I mean, he was so incredible in that role. Uh, Very difficult to like the guy. You know what I mean? It just he was such a jerk that it was just like Jesus Christ, I can't stand this guy. So anyway, Phil Leotardo. For anyone who hasn't seen The Sopranos or who needs a refresher, he was a high-ranking member of the Lupertazzi crime family. Right? Originally, he was an old guy who just got out of jail. He did 20 years in the can, never ratted on anybody, didn't turn on anybody. He stood firm and did his time like a man. So when he gets out, he becomes a captain for the Lupertazzi family, and eventually he ends up becoming the boss once Johnny Sack went to jail and then eventually died of cancer. Phil always had a problem with Tony Soprano, and really he had a problem with the whole Soprano crime family because they're from New Jersey and Phil was from New York. And one of the things that always struck me, and I went back and even watched some of his stuff, he said, "Come on, John, New Jersey? They're basically a glorified crew." Like saying, listen, they're beneath us. We're a real crime family. We're a real mob family. These guys are just a couple of punks. Why are we even paying them any mind? We don't even have to listen to them. We don't got to sit down with them. We don't got to even, cut them in on anything. We give them direction. I want to stop there for a second because I got to ask you this, Vito. Was that sentiment a real sentiment within New York? Did New York kind of look down on New Jersey as not being of the same stature?
I would think so because New York is New York. You know what I mean? It's part of the five boroughs. And, New Jersey was like kind of like the outskirts. And if you were in the five boroughs and you were a captain or you were in charge of any kind of crime family, I mean, that's where the main people were. It's just like in Tulsa King when, Sylvester Stallone went out to Tulsa and started his own family there. And you wouldn't think there's a mob, but there was of a different kind. But then in New Jersey, it was kind of like the secondary place you went. They put you out to pasture in New Jersey.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So that's where that attitude came from, so to speak. Now, the guy does 20 years in the can, right? 20 years in jail, never rats on anybody. At one point, he has a quote. He says, "Compromise. Let me tell you about compromise. I was sitting in jail for 20 years. I wanted Marigot. I couldn't have it, so I made grilled cheese sandwiches on my radiator. He said I wanted to, have relations with a woman. I couldn't have that, so I had to whack off in a tissue. You get my point here? That's just he knows a little something about compromise. That way of explaining himself and his philosophy on life. This is an old school guy who comes back into the world, and the world has changed. Kids, when he went into jail, are now grown men and they're walking around being in charge. And it pisses him off because he remembers the way things used to be. And there's a code and there's a way that things have to go. And these younger guys, they don't understand. And I shouldn't have to listen to these young punks because I was making bones before they even came out of their mama. But yet I got to stand here and treat this guy like he's on my level. This is ridiculous. This is how these guys think. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about the life or we're talking about any other aspect of society. Mature, more experienced people have a very difficult time having to take direction from or even treat somebody who's younger than them as an equal, especially when it comes to business. Why should I have to listen to this young punk? He doesn't know more than me. It's a very interesting thing there. So, Vito, you and I had a conversation before we were recording, and you had pointed out that you knew guys who were exactly like Phil Leotardo and you couldn't stand them. So I'm going to give you the mic here. Talk to me more about the Phil Leotardos that you came up with, and what was it about them that rubbed you the wrong way?
When you talk about the Phil Leonardos, like, especially back then, the guy put in his time, and you respect that. But when you're an arrogant prick and a smug piece of shit, and you want to come off like you're still living in the past, when there were other guys who came up just like you, did the same things just like you, but they didn't get to go in the can for 20 years because maybe they were a little smarter, they did things a little safer, right? Or, you don't show the respect that to these young guys, you know, you just come across as an asshole. And you think because you came out of the can, hey, yeah, you know, it's like being a retired Marine or retired, somebody in the armed forces. Thank you for your service. We still know you're here, but the things aren't going to run the way you used to do it because there's a new way of doing it. And when I used to come across these guys, and of course, I'd shake their hand, how you doing? And they, yeah, 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 like, I would just make my way, but then like I would be like, you know what, go fuck yourself because you're still a fucking arrogant prick. You know what I mean? And just because you still might be connected doesn't mean you don't have to show people respect because this thing of ours is built on respect. It's not built on the reputation that I'm going to kill you because there's somebody else who will pull a trigger or stab you in the neck or do something to you to get that street cred and rep and then take over your crew and then take over things from you. And that's how it's supposed to be, not supposed to be done. You know what I mean? But it is. And when you want to make your move ahead, you go ahead and do it. And you reap the repercussions of doing it without being sanctioned. And this Phil Leonardo, when um, Tony Soprano used to have meetings with him, and Johnny Sack was in the can. Anthony, I'm not being unreasonable. I'm just being a messenger. And he used to have an arrogant tone to Tony, and that's why Tony did not like him. And then when you weren't compromisable or you weren't doing things in a professional way, one thing led to another. Now there was a killing of his brother who died in his arms, and he was sour about that. And he thought Tony put the hit on him, and he always said, Anthony, you ever have somebody die in your arms? Well, that could happen. Well, I mean, when you're threatening somebody, you're a made guy, and you're going to threaten another made guy. Everybody's got their bodyguards there. But if one guy wants to I had enough of you, motherfucker, and you crack him one, or you go at it, what are they going to do? Are they going to, both teams are going to shoot each other out? Or the two guys are going to fucking settle their differences and do it the old fashioned way? I mean, what do you think about that, Duke?
No, you're absolutely right. It just as I'm listening to you describe all this, I'm shaking my head and laughing because it's like, yeah, Tony Soprano is Tony Soprano. He wants everybody to call him Tony. That's his name. That's what he likes to be called. His mother named him Anthony obviously Tony is short for Anthony, but the only people who call him Anthony are old people and people who may not know him so well. And the only time he's hearing his name as Anthony, most of the time, is when he's in trouble. So the fact that this old timer comes around, this Phil Leotardo, and he's calling him Anthony as he's kind of dressing him down a little bit. That John's not going to like that, Anthony. Oh yeah, well I don't know about that, Anthony. It's like, buddy, who are you talking to? So exactly what you described is exactly the way the guy was. The arrogance and the the attitude that was just I'm better than you was so incredible that you could only go to war with a guy like that because he's never going to give you your respect. And all the way to the end, Phil Leotardo never gave Tony Soprano his respect, despite the fact that Tony was a boss.
No, you're
It's
right.
crazy.
And then the fact that Phil was the one who killed Vito, who was a capo in Tony's family, and that's when they went to war with each other, and that's when things really hit the fan. Even though Vito was, you know, did his thing and they portrayed him in a different way, he still was a member of Tony's family. And you don't whack a made guy unless you get it sanctioned or you talk to somebody and do it. He took it upon himself to do it because he thought that Vito disrespected his family by being married to, I believe, his daughter and having kids and doing all this, and he was an embarrassment, and it should have been taken care of. But it wasn't Phil's, you know, it kind of was Phil's department to do something about it, maybe in a quiet way, but not in this big grand way to make a big spectacle of it and make a showing. If you can understand what I'm saying.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was Phil's cousin. So Vito was married to Phil's cousin, and unfortunately, he was cheating on his wife with a man, and Phil wasn't going to put up with that. So he overstepped his bounds and ended up whacking Vito, which is crazy because, like you just said, Vito was not only was he a captain for the Soprano family, but Vito was a earner. He was a good earner. He was I think he was the top earner at the time.
Right.
So the fact that you not only did you whack one of somebody else's one of his captains, but you took money out of the family's pocket by getting rid of one of the top earners there, and that's just unacceptable.
You
You
know,
know,
and
there could have been other things they could have done.
and then there was another hit by the Phil Leonardo's family when they clipped Bobby Basilari, and that was even more of even more of a disrespect to Tony Soprano because not only killed one guy, he killed two guys in his family.
Yeah, yeah. At that point, they were at war. They took it to the mattresses, so it was what it was. But Bobby had just been promoted. I guess he was basically the underboss at that point, right?
Right. And then
So this is
that's when Tony sanctioned the assassination of Phil, and he didn't need any more incentive. Johnny Sack was gone. Phil was in charge. Tony took over, and the rest is history. But you know, when you talk about doing things in this nature, there's always a sit down, and every sit down we saw with Phil and Tony, it was a mutual dislike and disrespect. And Tony's, why do you got to be like this? Didn't we have a moment? Why can't we? And Tony tried to be reasonable and Tony tried to be helpful, but Phil was just a cocksucker of a guy. And he lived that life. And, he thought he was better than everybody. He should have been the boss and king. Everybody should gravitate to him. But then in the end, because you're a prick, you got what you deserved in the end.
yeah. Well said. Well said. Tony, and I know that we're saving him for last, but when I go back and rewatch the series, I realize that Tony Soprano runs into this issue throughout the entire series, and I never really thought about it like that until now. The elders, he always had a problem with them. They just did not want to accept him as a boss because they always viewed him as the young punk. And it's such a strange thing, but it happens in life. You know, any job that you work, if you become a boss, if you become a manager, a supervisor, whatever, where you're responsible for managing other people and especially managing their job performance, if you manage people who are older than you, it is a struggle. They're either going to accept you and they're going to go your way, or they're going to resist you until you do something about it. And that's just the way it is. I can remember being a young kid working in retail, and I became a manager, and I had this old guy who was older than my mom. And he and I would just butt heads. And it was so ridiculous because it wasn't like I was telling the guy to do anything outside of whatever everybody else had to do. It's just that he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it the way that I was telling him to do it. I say, hey, go talk to that customer over there and, see what she needs. No, I'm changing prices right now. I don't got time for that. I'm updating the price tags. And it's like, no, you can stop doing that and go help out that customer. It's like, changing the price tags don't matter if the customers aren't spending any money. Like, we gotta, it has to make sense here. And the guy gave me attitude until finally I had to pull him aside and let him know, listen, either you want this job or not. I don't have a problem with just getting rid of you. You're going to do it the way I asked you to do it, or you're not going to be here. And the guy was offended. And he actually took it above my head, and the regional manager had to let him know, no, he's right. It's his store. He's running it. That's what we pay him to do. He's giving you direction. He's not asking you to do anything that you're not supposed to be doing. So what's the problem here? So here's the funny part. They wanted me to fire the guy, but I knew that the guy was taking care of his even older mom, his elderly mother who was dying. He was the one he was her caretaker, and he had this job just to make a couple extra bucks to take care of business and what have you. I didn't want to fire the guy.
Right.
So here's what I did. I set some things up. I did a contest for the store. Whoever sells the most whatever, I'm going to take them out to lunch. And I put him on a shift that I knew was going to be busy. It was a Saturday. I knew it was going to be busy. And sure enough, he was able to win. He sold one more unit than the person behind him. So he won. I got to take him out to lunch. And I took him out and we were talking. And the guy says to me, and I'm not kidding you, Vito, the guy says to me, he says, this is the first time in my career. And the guy was 62 years old. And listen, I'm a young kid. Jesus, how old am I at that point? 24, 25 maybe? He says, it's the first time in my career that a manager had ever taken me out for lunch and had told me I did a good job. And when that guy told me that, I just shook my head because I'm like, no wonder the guy is the way that he is. You know what I mean? His resistance and his bad attitude clouded everybody's judgment and they just gave up on him. I took the time to understand the guy, and then I let him know, look, I got a job to do. You got a job to do. As long as you do the right thing, I'm going to reward you. So please just go my way. Give it a shot. Let's see how it goes. And Vito, I'm not kidding you. He ended up being one of my top salespeople after that. And then because he did a good job figuring out the price tags and updating the pricing and stuff like that, I actually put him in charge of that to train other people on how to keep doing the updates and stuff because they come out every couple of days. So he actually kept everything organized like that. And I'm like, all right, now it's time to sell. But I would help him out. If I knew a customer was probably going to make a big purchase, I'd bring him in with me and then I would walk away and let him close it. So he'd sell a $2,000 massage chair and he'd make a couple, an extra $100 on top of his pay for the week. And the guy loved me for that. But I was getting his production. So I loved him for that. But it's like everybody doesn't have the time to go that extra mile and figure each other out. Unfortunately, we're all living at the same time. We all have our responsibilities. But it's just sad when you have people who just give you a hard time because they don't want to get with the times. And that's exactly what was Phil Leotardo's problem. He just didn't want to get with the times. He wanted to stay and keep things the way they used to be. But things ain't that way no more. Right. That's just the way it is.
Now, there was another person who was the same way in Fitch Lamana, who came out and he wanted to get his
Beach.
yep, and he wanted to get his shy business back. He wanted to go back on the street, and Tony told him, "Long as you don't step on nobody's toes." I'm going to make a couple of moves. First, he went down and he took care of the long guy, kicked the shit out of him. Right, he wanted the neighborhood back, and then Paulie went to go see him, and he said, "You don't fucking got nothing. You've been away for 25 years. You don't have nothing." So then him and Cheech Feach got into it, right? Two old timers. But Paulie was right. You don't come back and you take what's not yours. Then when he sold the car to Johnny Sack, and instead of going to Tony first, Tony got mad because he's not repaying him for putting him back in business. And then when he made a heist, he said, "When was I going to get my end?" And he really wasn't there to do it, but he felt like he had to and treated Tony as a secondary class citizen. Here's your share. No respect. Same kind of attitude as Phil Leonardo. And that's why Feach was taken out and put back in prison because he was a problem.
And they were clever with the way that they did that. See, Tony could have just whacked him, but he decided not to go that way. So they set Feach up, had the cops show up. He had some stuff in his driveway that he shouldn't have, and that's where he got put back in jail, which he probably ended up dying in jail because of that.
Right.
So even in that moment, Tony still showed compassion. But boy, you're right. Feach, he just did not want to get with the times. He didn't want to take direction from younger people. And that's just the way it was. So it was constant headbutting, man, just constant headbutting, crazy. So it's an interesting. Listen, let me ask you this because something kept popping up on the show. I want to get your take on this before we
Yeah.
wrap it up on this thing. There's a distinction that they make, and Phil made it, Tony made it throughout the series as well, where they talk about, yeah, I'm white, but I'm Italian. So you have your Italians and then you have your Mexicans. I'm not like them. I'm not like the average white guy. I'm not the average Mexicans. Talk to me about that notion of within the culture feeling like you're not like everybody else. You're this separate thing.
Well, I mean, there's different types of Italian cultures, you know, and when you talk about like Napolitan, Sicilian, like I always joke, and I say, hey, you're from Southern Italy because we have olive skin and we're darker, than people, and I say that, to a lot of my, I'm from Southern Italy because I always have a tan or I'm always, you know, I always look like I'm in the sun. And like if I go take the sun for a half hour, my tan is back. I don't have to sit there for 9 hours. And it's just a prestige thing, of where you come from, where your families come. Um, if Italy, is in the peninsula in southern Europe, which I don't think people knew, and that's why I said southern Italy, you know. So when you talk about who comes from there, North Africans, Italian, Albanians, Germans, Australians, European, those are the European groups, you know, and what they're known for is art, music, and food. But you're talking about something that's southern of Europe. It's just like you have New Yorkers and then you have the South, is the best way to explain it for everybody following along. So when you got that, vibe, and you know what you're thinking, you look at it as the Greeks and the Romans. Everybody says, okay, what's the difference between Greeks and Romans? You would think, hey, the Greeks and Romans are the same. No, but it's two different cultures, you know? And then when you talk about, you know, what is the most um, famous, or what is the best culture in Italian heritage, it's really a toss up because it goes with beliefs, it goes with customs, it goes with what you're brought up on. You know. Now I'll give you for instance, and my brother could laugh at this because I'm going to say it. and this is not a disrespect to anybody, but when you used to go down to 18th Avenue, where my father used to hang out, and you used to have those guys who just came over on the boat, or the guys who never learned English, and they were arrogant fucking assholes. And they were called geeps, you know. And every time somebody who was like that, I wanted to fucking beat the fucking piss out of them because I couldn't stand them. And my father fucking told me, "Yeah, you can't do that." I said, "Look at this motherfucker! I want to kick the shit out of him." Because he used to just talk like, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on? What are you doing? Brush your team." Go fuck yourself. You're over here in America. It's a certain way to act. This isn't the fucking neighborhood in Italy in some small town. When you used to treat people like that, yeah, I'll give you a fucking smack. No, I'm going to take a fucking chair and crack your head open, and then we'll see what you're going to do then. And that was just the mentality, a greaseball fucking mentality that I could not fucking stand because they didn't want to become Americanized. And they could all go back on a fucking boat tomorrow.
So are you saying you're one of the Medicons that they say they didn't want to be like? Is that what you're telling me here?
Hey, that's for a fucking different time, Duke. You know what I mean? Come on, you really want to get.
Listen, I'll tell you right now.
Hold on. Before you say something, I just want to say the people who just listen to my rant, this is nothing against you. If you're a part of that heritage, this is my take and what I dealt with in my life and um, uh, my view on this subject. Go ahead, Duke.
Well, and also let's call it what it is too. The world as a whole, the world is far more modernized today than it was back then. So
Right.
those guys who wanted to hold on to the old way of things, and that's all they knew, and they never wanted to assimilate or be part of the culture here, that's what you got. So I understand where you're coming from. Let's put it like that. I get it, right? Because there was a distinction and there was a line drawn and there was an attitude of I'm better than, even though we have the same ancestry, so to speak, somehow, some way, because I'm still connected to back home more than you are. You were born here. I was born there. I'm better than you. And it's a ridiculous concept that still exists to this day in a lot of cultures, but it's not as prevalent as it was because with the internet and everything like that, the world is connected on a whole different level, and it's more modernized now. So people have a better understanding of each other now, and what's old is still old. It's not new again, and it never will be. Just is what it is. Anyway, Vito, what's the best way everyone listening can keep up with you?
It's at the Big Vito brand. You find us on Twitter, find us on TikTok. Go to our our people at the Big Vito brand. On Facebook, we're on Instagram at the Big Vito brand. Uh, I'm over here with Duke of Wrestling, and we're talking about this thing of ours, friend of ours, everything of ours, because you know what? It's our thing, and we're sharing it with you. Ain't that right, Duke?
We sure are. We sure are. Duke Loves Wrestling on Facebook, on Twitter, Duke Loves Wrestling at gmail.com. As always, let me know what you think. People really got a kick out of that Johnny Sack episode there, so hopefully you enjoyed this Phil Leotardo and everything else in between there. We're going to go in a different direction next week because I want to talk about the children. I want to talk about the kids in The Sopranos. Not just Tony's kids, but all the different kids, even Jackie Aprio, who is a tragic tale. This kid they wanted him to go make something out of himself in college and what have you. He wanted to be part of life. It caught up with him. There's a lot of interesting twists and turns there that the kids in that series had to deal with. I think that'll be interesting to talk about. Anyway, until then, Vito, take us out with your word of the week.
I'm going to do a little happiness here. Bueno tale. Bueno tale.
I love it.
A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. song, a mystery